Hello, my name is Stubidubins. Today I am going to mathematically determine the top 10 offensive Pokemon type combinations. I evaluated each type combination's offensive effectiveness against every defensive type combination, assigning values based on weaknesses and resistances. The sum of the values yields the overall offensive value for each type combination. Share predictions in the comments, and let's explore the top 10 results. At number 10, I have Rock Ice. This type combination is resisted by 5% of the Pokedex, is neutral to 49%, and is strong against 46%. Pokemon who share this type are the Aurorus line and Hisuian Applelug, neither of which are particularly offensive Pokemon, and definitely are held back by this awful defensive typing that is actually second worst in the game. At number 9, I have Flying Fighting. This combination is resisted by 1% of the Pokedex, is neutral to 50% of the Pokedex, and is strong against 48% of the Pokedex. The Pokemon who have this typing are Galarian Zapdos, Hawlucha, and Flamigo. This is a much better example of offensive Pokemon who are not held back by their defensive typing. At number 8, I have Fighting Ice. This combination is resisted by 4% of the dex, is neutral to 45%, and is strong against 51%. The only Pokemon with this type is Chromominable, which has a very high attack stat, but is very slow and has the 6th worst defensive typing in the game. It doesn't matter how many mounds you can hit super effectively if you can't get the chance to hit them. At number 7, I have Steel Ground. This combination is resisted by 3% of the Pokedex, is neutral to 60% of the Pokedex, and is strong against 37% of the Pokedex. Some Pokemon with this type are Excadrill and Iron Treads. At number 6, I have Rock Fighting, which is resisted by 3%, neutral to 50%, and strong against 47%. The only Pokemon with this type is Terrakion. This is the 7th worst defensive typing. It's kind of weird because I think of most rock-type Pokemon as more defensive than offensive, but the data thus far is showing the exact opposite. At number 5, I have Fairy Ground. This is resisted by 1% of the dex, neutral to 55%, and strong against 44% of the dex. This is actually the only type on this list without a Pokemon. At number 4, I have Ground Fire. This type is resisted by 2% of the dex, neutral to 50%, and strong against 48%. This type is only used by Camerupt and Primal Groudon. I think it's interesting to see what holds back these Pokemon from being really good offensive threats, and for Camerupt is very clearly speed and being a 4 times weakness to the most prevalent type in the game in water, whereas Primal Groudon is immune to water and, decently quick. At number 3, I have Flying Ground. This type is resisted by 1% of Pokemon, neutral to 49%, and effective against 50%. This type is shared by the Gliscor line and both Landorus's, Landorus-I, Landorus's. I think the main reason we don't think Gliscor and one of the Landorus-sauces as offensive threats is neither really have access to flying type moves to take advantage of their typing, but nonetheless this is an S tier offensive type and a very good defensive type. At number 2, I have Rock Ground. This type combination resisted by 8 total Pokemon, Grass Ground and Grass Fighting. It is neutral to 42% of Pokemon and is strong against 47% of Pokemon. Some Pokemon with this type are the Rhyperior line and the Golem line. Going through this list, I've been asking myself, why does Game Freak give these great offensive type to these awful defensive Pokemon? I think what I figured out during making this list is that Rock is a very poorly used type. They try to use it on defensive type Pokemon, but it has so many weaknesses and it's bad into so many matchups. But it also is a pretty good offensive type, as we've seen, and has good matchups against a lot of different type combinations, so it's kind of interesting. At number 1, I have a type that definitely surprised me going in, and that type is Ground Ice. This type by far is the best type we have seen. It is resisted by only 4 Pokemon lines, those types being Water Bug and Ice Bug. It is neutral to 46% of the Pokedex and is strong against 54% of the Pokedex, which is by far the most. The only Pokemon with this type is the Mamosine line, and I'm very happy that we were finally able to end off with a good offensive Pokemon. So that's my list. I think what I learned making this is that offensive typing doesn't matter a huge amount if defensively you are garbage. I previously put out a top 10 defensive Pokemon list, and you can see a link to that here. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to put out my top 10 overall Pokemon types list next. Thanks and goodbye.